The Boston winter was colder than usual, and Megan Walker was warming her swollen belly with both hands in front of the fireplace. 1 week until her due date. It would be her first childbirth. "Are your feet still cold?" asked Brian, her husband, as he entered the living room. He was always busy as an executive at the fastest-growing real estate development company in Boston's suburbs. His tall, fit build and friendly smile were some of the reasons Megan had fallen for him at first sight 5 years ago. "I'm fine, getting much better now," Megan smiled in response. A former pediatric nurse, she had quit her job when she learned she was pregnant and was now dedicated to preparing for the baby's arrival as a full-time homemaker. Before Brian could reply, the doorbell rang. "That must be Mom," he said as he headed toward the front door. Carol kissed her son on the cheek before proceeding to the living room. She was a well-known philanthropist in Boston's social circles and respected as a local dignitary. "Megan, how's the baby?" Carol asked as she sat next to her daughter-in-law. There was concern in her voice, but something else seemed to lurk in her gaze. "Everything's fine, Carol. All the regular checkups show everything's normal." "That's good to hear. After all, this is the Walker family heir, so I hope the baby is born healthy." Carol's words always carried a subtle weight. Phrases like Walker family tradition and Walker family heir were staples in her conversations. Brian brought in tea for the three of them from the kitchen, and the conversation shifted to weekend plans. Recently, Brian's work had become busier, and the couple's time together had been dwindling. Late-night phone calls and weekend emergency work outings had increased, making Megan gradually uneasy. "What are we doing this weekend?" Megan asked, and Brian and Carol exchanged a quick glance. "Actually," Brian began, choosing his words carefully, "I have a little surprise." Carol cut in excitedly. "We've planned a wonderful weekend trip. As a final family vacation before the baby arrives." Megan looked at them both in surprise. "But I'm due in a week. Going on a trip at a time like this." "It'll be fine," Carol waved her hand dismissively. "First babies are usually late. Mine was. Besides, didn't your doctor say that if you don't feel the baby coming soon, a short trip nearby would be okay?" The doctor had indeed said that, but Megan's idea of a nearby was within an hour of home. However, according to the reservation confirmation Brian showed her, the destination was a luxury resort in the Berkshire Hills, a mountain resort 4 hours by car from Megan's parents' home and the hospital. "But it's so far away, if something happens." "Nothing will happen," Brian took Megan's hand. "This will be our last chance to make memories as a family. Once the baby arrives, we won't be able to take trips like this for a while, right?" Megan felt uncertain about her husband's words. What he said made sense. Her relationship with Carol had been delicate since the pregnancy, and this trip might be an opportunity to strengthen the bond between the three of them. Still, she couldn't shake an odd feeling. "I guess so." Megan reluctantly agreed. "But promise we'll turn back immediately if I feel anything concerning." "Of course," Brian beamed with a wide smile. There seemed to be a hint of relief in his expression. Carol stood up and declared, "Then it's settled. We'll leave Friday afternoon." There was evident joy in her eyes. "Pack light. And especially." She paused as she looked at Megan's belly, seemingly choosing her words. "Don't bring any hospital things. It's bad luck." Megan nodded without responding. She had no intention of following that suggestion. From her experience as a nurse, she was always one to be prepared. That night, while Brian was in the shower, Megan noticed his cell phone left on the living room table. A notification sound rang, and the screen lit up. Normally she wouldn't have paid attention, but something compelled her to glance at the screen. It was a message from an unknown woman. "Looking forward to spending time together tomorrow." Megan felt like her heart stopped for a moment. But she quickly regained her composure. It could be a work colleague. Maybe just a friend. Maybe she was misunderstanding. Pursuing it would only ruin this important weekend. She returned the phone to its original place and headed to her room. While packing for the weekend, she secretly slipped a small emergency kit and a backup cell phone with a pregnancy health management app installed into the bottom of her bag. Being prepared for the worst was a principle she had lived by since her nursing days. That night, Megan stared at the ceiling for a long time. Each time the baby moved in her womb, a wave of both love and anxiety swept over her. "It's okay, Mommy will protect you," she whispered, placing her hand on her belly. Friday afternoon, departure time arrived. Megan was doing a final luggage check at the front door. The weather forecast promised sunshine for the weekend, but the mountain areas of the Berkshire Hills were known for unpredictable weather. As a precaution, she slipped a warm jacket into her bag. "Ready to go?" Brian called as he closed the trunk of the car. He had been fidgety and restless all morning, repeatedly checking his watch. "Yes, I'm fine," Megan replied with a smile, though anxiety swirled within her. Just before departure, she had called her doctor to consult about the trip. The doctor had emphasized, "If you feel anything unusual, go to the nearest hospital immediately." Carol claimed the passenger seat and, while adjusting her hair in the rearview mirror, urged, "We'll be late, let's get going." Megan climbed into the back seat and adjusted her seatbelt. A long drive is never comfortable for a pregnant woman. She placed a cushion against her back to try to make the journey as comfortable as possible. As soon as the car started moving, Brian's cell phone rang. He tensed up for a moment after looking at the screen, then said, "Just a work call," before answering. The conversation was oddly reserved, with short replies like, "It's fine, all according to plan." "Who was that?" Megan asked, and Brian replied, "Just a colleague, checking on weekend handover details," before changing the subject. Afterward, he continued checking his phone frequently. During the journey, Carol pretended to be concerned about Megan's condition while repeatedly making statements demanding excessive strength, such as, "In my day, we worked normally even while pregnant," and "Walker women all have strong mental fortitude." "But times are different, Carol," Megan gently countered. "Now, pregnant women's safety is the top priority." Carol sighed. "That's why you're too pampered. The baby will probably take after you." She swallowed her words and looked out the window. After driving for about 2 hours, Megan began to feel bladder pressure. "Sorry, could we take a bathroom break?" she asked hesitantly. "Now?" Brian responded with obvious irritation. "Can't you hold it until the next service area?" "But for a pregnant woman, bladder pressure." "All right," Carol interrupted. "But the next service area is only about 10 minutes away, right? Hold it a little longer." Megan did as she was told, but that 10 minutes actually took more than 25 minutes. Even when they finally stopped at a rest area, Brian and Carol were already waiting in the car when she returned from the restroom, urging, "Let's get going." "I'd like to rest a little," Megan said, but Carol replied, "We won't make our reservation time." "What reservation?" "Hotel check-in and dinner reservation," Brian answered, but his gaze seemed unfocused. Back in the car, Megan began to feel a dull pain around her lower back. Discomfort in late pregnancy was common, but it seemed to be worsening with the long car ride. "My back hurts a bit," she said, and Carol muttered under her breath, "So dramatic." Around 4 p.m., Brian's cell phone rang again. He said, "Excuse me," and pulled the car over to the shoulder, stepping outside to take the call. Watching him through the window, Megan noticed he was talking with an expression she had never seen before. Occasionally, he would glance nervously at the car where Megan sat. Megan caught fragments of the conversation, "Definitely tonight, as promised, can't tell her." Anxiety and suspicion began to grow within her. When Brian returned to the car, he said, "Sorry, work trouble," but Megan instinctively felt it was a lie. "Brian, is this really just for a family trip?" she summoned the courage to ask. "Are you hiding something?" Brian suddenly became irritable. "What are you saying?" "I planned this trip especially for you," he raised his voice. Doubting my son, Carol joined in. "It must be your pregnancy hormones causing these suspicious thoughts." Megan tried to argue but realized it was futile. It was clear these two were plotting something, but she still didn't know exactly what. She looked out the window, silently fighting back tears. Exhausted, Megan eventually decided to take a nap in the car. Before closing her eyes, she set her smartphone to share her location with her friend Amber. Just in case, she thought. When she woke up, the car was parked in front of a luxury resort hotel. However, it was clearly different from the hotel in the reservation confirmation Brian had shown her. This one was more luxurious, more sophisticated. "Where are we?" Megan asked in confusion. "This isn't the place we planned to stay, is it?" "Oh, I changed the reservation at the last minute," Brian replied casually. "This place has better facilities, so I thought it would be more comfortable for you, being pregnant and all." The words sounded kind, but Megan felt uneasy. Why hadn't he consulted her beforehand? As the three headed to the front desk, the receptionist greeted them with a smile. "Mr. Walker, we've been expecting you. Your suite for two is ready." "For two?" Megan looked at her husband in confusion. "A room for Mom and me, and you have a separate room," Brian answered naturally. "I got you a spacious single room so you, as a pregnant woman, can be more comfortable." "Why aren't we in the same room?" "Well, I'd just be in the way, wouldn't I?" Carol interjected. "Besides, you're about to become a mother. Don't you need some time alone?" Megan felt that further questioning would be pointless. She accepted her room keycard and followed the porter to her room. The moment she was alone in the room, she let out a deep sigh. The next morning, when Megan woke up, the clock already showed 9 a.m. The fatigue of late pregnancy and yesterday's long journey had made her sleep longer than usual. She picked up her smartphone to check for messages from Brian. "Already had breakfast. Going shopping with Mom. We'll be back around noon, so rest until then." Megan sighed. Throughout their 5 years of marriage, she and Brian had always made it a habit to have breakfast together. She felt lonely that there was so little time spent together on what was supposed to be a special trip. She headed alone to the hotel restaurant and had breakfast by the window. Gazing at the beautiful mountain scenery, she pondered why what should have been a wonderful trip had become so uncomfortable. After finishing her meal, she spent some time in the hotel lobby lounge. Sitting on a sofa in front of the fireplace, she passed the time reading a book on childbirth preparation she had brought along. Occasionally, she would place her hand on her belly as the baby moved, whispering softly, "Mommy will protect you." In the early afternoon, Brian and Carol finally returned. They were carrying shopping bags from luxury brands and seemed unusually cheerful. "Megan, still in your pajamas?" Carol frowned. "It's already noon. Get dressed quickly." "How was the shopping?" Megan asked, observing the two. "Wonderful," Carol replied excitedly. "There are lovely boutiques around here." "Brian made some good purchases too, didn't you?" Brian nodded somewhat nervously. "I guess so." He placed the shopping bags behind the sofa as if trying to hide them. "What did you buy?" Megan asked out of curiosity. "Just some business ties," Brian replied uneasily. "Anyway, hurry up and get ready. We're going sightseeing now." "Now?" Megan was surprised. "But I'd like to rest a bit more. The car ride yesterday left me quite tired." "You can rest again later," Carol interrupted. "It would be a waste to stay cooped up in your room during a trip like this." "But..." "Please, Megan," Brian's voice had an unusually firm tone. "There are wonderful views in this area. I've heard the lakeside road is especially spectacular." Megan reluctantly agreed. She returned to her room, changed into comfortable clothes, and packed the essentials in her bag. Just in case, she also included spare underwear in preparation for her water breaking. And as a little secret known only to Megan, she turned on her location sharing feature and sent a short message to her friend Amber. "On a trip but feeling odd. Don't worry, but I'm sharing my location just in case." 30 minutes later, the three were driving along mountain roads in Brian's car. Carol spread out a map in the passenger seat and said, "It's best to drive around this lake." From the back seat, Megan admired the scenery, but gradually began to feel a dull pain around her lower back. It seemed stronger than the usual discomforts of late pregnancy, but she didn't yet consider it to be labor. "Turn right here," Carol instructed. "We're getting closer to the lake." The car continued down a narrow mountain road, and soon a beautiful lake came into view. It truly was spectacular. The blue, clear surface of the lake reflected the mountains, shimmering under the clear sky. However, Megan had little opportunity to fully appreciate the beauty as the pain in her back grew stronger and began to come at regular intervals. "Brian," she called anxiously. "Could we take a break? My back hurts. Can you bear with it just a little longer?" Brian replied, focusing on his driving. "There's a scenic rest area about 10 minutes from here." Megan sighed and looked out the window. Suddenly, a strong pain spread from her back to her lower abdomen. Then she felt her seat becoming warm and wet. She immediately understood her situation. Her water had broken. I think my water just broke," Megan said, her voice trembling with anxiety and pain. Carol turned around with a surprised expression. However, that expression quickly changed to a cold smile. "What? Now? You really can't read the room, can you? Are you doing this on purpose?" "Huh?" Megan was at a loss for words, confused and in pain. Her mother-in-law's reaction was completely unexpected. "You couldn't wait just a bit longer on our special trip? You're really such a nuisance." Carol made no attempt to hide her irritation. Brian continued driving without taking his eyes off the road, but he was biting his lip hard. "Why now, just this one day?" he muttered softly, then exhaled deeply. "Seriously, going into labor during our trip, what an inconvenience." Megan looked at them both in disbelief. She never imagined her husband and mother-in-law would respond so coldly to her water breaking. Another wave of pain washed over her, and she doubled over. "I need to get to a hospital," she said desperately. "Please, find the nearest hospital." "Hospital?" Carol sneered. "The nearest hospital is at least 40 minutes away from here. Besides, as a former nurse, you should know that first births take time." "But my water broke. There's risk of infection." Megan tried to explain using her medical knowledge, but the pain interrupted her words. Brian gripped the steering wheel tightly and coldly declared, "We can just go to the next town, and you can take a bus or taxi back." "What, you're not coming with me to the hospital?" Megan asked in disbelief. She couldn't accept that this was the father of her child. "It would take 4 hours from here. All our plans would be ruined." Brian was clearly displeased. "What plans? Isn't this a family trip?" Megan desperately questioned. In her mind, she was trying to connect all the dots: her husband's strange behavior, her mother-in-law's hostility, and now their excessive reaction at this timing. "Look, this is just getting awkward for everyone," Carol cut in. "You just worry about yourself." "Then, can you call a taxi for me?" Megan asked, enduring the pain. She already realized she couldn't rely on these two. After exchanging disgruntled looks, Brian and Carol agreed to drop Megan off at the train station in a small town. The car descended the mountain road and eventually arrived at a small tourist town station. "This will do," Brian stopped the car and said coldly. "The taxi stand is over there." Megan opened the door with trembling hands and slowly got out of the car. Brian took her small bag from the back seat and handed it to her without a word. "You're really going to let me go alone?" Megan asked, pinning her last hope on them. "I told you already. We have plans." Brian avoided her gaze. "You'll be fine, you're a former nurse, you can handle this yourself." Carol opened her window and said, "Let us know when the baby is safely born." There wasn't a hint of warmth in her voice. Megan was left alone in the station square. Doubled over in pain, she somehow made it to the taxi stand. Fortunately, a taxi was waiting. "Are you all right, miss?" an older female driver asked with concern. "Please take me to the nearest hospital," Megan said, fighting back tears. "My water broke, and I'm having contractions." "Oh my. The driver showed a surprised expression but quickly regained her composure. Don't worry, we'll get to the hospital soon. Don't worry about the seat. As the taxi started moving, Megan took out her smartphone again. With fingers trembling from pain, she sent a message to her husband. Heading to a nearby hospital. I'll be fine on my own. Don't let me interrupt your important plans. After pressing send, she put the phone back in her bag. She wasn't expecting a reply. And sure enough, none came. First baby, the taxi driver gently asked. Yes, Megan answered quietly. Are you alone? Where's your husband? He seems to have other plans. Megan gave a bitter smile. The driver looked at Megan through the rearview mirror and said kindly, Don't worry, you're not alone. I'm here with you. Megan was grateful for those words and silently shed tears. It was ironic that a stranger cared more about her than her husband and mother-in-law. The taxi descended the mountain road, heading to the next town. As the scenery flowed by outside the window, Megan's life was about to change dramatically. She placed her hand on her belly and whispered softly, It's just going to be you and me now, little one. We'll manage together. After 16 long and painful hours of labor, Megan gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Named Ethan, the baby weighed 7 pounds and had a strong cry despite his small body. When Megan held her child in her arms for the first time, all the pain and sadness temporarily disappeared. Hello, Ethan, she whispered through tears. Mommy will protect you. The maternity ward at Sunnybrook Regional Hospital was small, but the staff was warm and caring, especially the charge nurse, Susan, who showed Megan special consideration. Where's your family? Susan gently asked while providing post-birth care. Megan explained the situation, fighting back tears. Susan couldn't hide her anger but maintained her professionalism as she said, You and the baby are not alone. We're here for you. Even after 48 hours since the birth, there was no contact from either Brian or Carol. Megan had called multiple times, but all went to voicemail. The only comfort was that her best friend Amber had found the hospital using the location information and rushed to her side. I can't believe it, Amber sat by Megan's bedside, her expression mixing anger and sadness. I'm just so glad you and Ethan are safe. Amber, what should I do? Megan said in a tired voice. When I go home, Brian and... Come stay with me, Amber said without hesitation. Stay at my place for a while. I'll help with the baby preparations. On the day of discharge, Megan and Ethan headed to Amber's apartment in the Boston suburbs. During the journey, Megan silently stared out the window. Her mind was filled with confusion and questions about what to do next. A few days after settling at Amber's, Megan began to feel the need to know the truth. She decided to first check her husband's bank statements online. She knew the password to access Brian's account. Oh my God. She gasped as she stared at the screen. The recent expense history showed a large purchase from Blossom's Jewelry. It's not my birthday or our anniversary. Further investigation revealed records of stays at unfamiliar hotels and meals at expensive restaurants, all matching the dates when Brian had said he was working late. To clear her head, Megan began searching for divorce lawyer information on her smartphone. By chance, while searching with Brian's name, she made an unexpected discovery. A secondary social media account, different from his usual one, appeared in the search results. The profile picture showed a back view, but Brian's distinctive watch and suit were visible. With a mix of curiosity and anxiety, Megan opened the profile. The account was completely public, typical of Brian's carelessness. He probably never thought his wife would find this account. The timeline was filled with fragments of a life unknown to Megan. Photos holding hands with another woman, meals at fancy restaurants, and a post from several months ago with the message, Our family is about to grow, accompanied by a photo of a hand caressing a woman's swollen belly. With her heart nearly stopping, Megan enlarged the photo and clearly saw the woman's face, Jessica, a former colleague. No way, with her. Moving to the next post, Megan's body froze. It was from 3 days ago, the day Megan was alone in the hospital enduring labor, with the message, Our long-awaited son is finally born. The best moment of my life, and a happy photo of Brian and Jessica holding a newborn baby. The location tag showed the name of a luxury hospital just 30 minutes from the town where Megan had been dropped off. It was all planned. Megan was speechless. Jessica had given birth on the same day Megan's water broke. The true purpose of the trip was to keep Megan away so Brian could attend Jessica's delivery. Seeking conclusive evidence, Megan checked the GPS history of her husband's car. The shared vehicle app contained driving records from the past few months. While telling Megan he was working, Brian had actually been visiting the same location, a luxury apartment, multiple times. For one final confirmation, Megan summoned her courage and called Brian's colleague, Thomas. "I'm sorry, but I can't reach my husband in an emergency. Can you tell me where he's been traveling lately?" Traveling? Brian hasn't gone on any business trips for over a year. If anything, he's been taking more early leaves and days off, which has been troubling everyone. Rumor has it, he's been with some other woman. Thomas stopped mid-sentence. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Now everything connected. Brian had been having a long-term affair with Jessica, and they had a child together. The purpose of the trip was to keep Megan away so Brian could attend Jessica's delivery. They were in a hurry because Jessica was showing signs of early labor. And what hurt most was that Carol had been complicit in this plan. To confirm one more suspicion, Megan also searched for Carol's social media account. There was a post about the birth of a long-awaited first grandchild, with a photo of her holding Jessica's baby. The caption included the words, "Future heir to the Walker family." She recognized Jessica as the ideal daughter-in-law from the start. Megan's body trembled as she learned the full truth. That's why she was so anxious when she found out I was going into labor. Brought back to reality by Ethan's cry, Megan rushed to her baby. Looking at her child sleeping in her arms, she made a decision. "I have enough evidence," she said, her hands shaking as she printed out the evidence and compiled it into a file. "With this, I can protect our future. I won't let them ruin our lives ever again." Amber entered the room and placed a hand on Megan's shoulder. "What will you do?" "I'm contacting a divorce lawyer," Megan said firmly. "And I'm going to prepare to start a new life." 3 months later, Megan walked with unwavering steps down the corridor of the Boston family court. In her arms was Ethan, peacefully sleeping. Beside her, attorney Rebecca Schreiber was doing a final check of the documents. "Ready?" Rebecca asked kindly. "Today's the final day." Megan took a deep breath and answered, "Yes." The divorce proceedings had gone surprisingly smoothly. The evidence Megan had gathered, social media posts, bank statements, GPS records, was all conclusive. Additionally, testimonials from Eleanor the taxi driver and Susan the nurse who had helped her had been submitted. Citing marital infidelity, abandonment of a pregnant woman, and psychological abuse, Rebecca had demanded full alimony, child support, and sole custody. Entering the courtroom, Brian was seated with his lawyer. He no longer appeared confident, instead, he looked exhausted as he gazed at Megan. Carol was nowhere to be seen. Later, Megan would learn that Carol had refused to appear in court due to concerns about social face. "With all parties present, I will now deliver the judgment," Judge Harris said quietly. He looked at Brian with stern eyes and stated, "The defendant's actions are recognized as highly malicious, severely damaging the trust of marriage and endangering the safety of the pregnant plaintiff and her unborn child." The final judgment fully recognized Megan's claims. In addition to substantial alimony and child support, and full sole custody, Brian and Carol's visitation rights were severely restricted for acts significantly detrimental to the child's welfare. When leaving the courtroom, Megan didn't look back. It symbolized her break with the past. 1 year later, in a leafy suburb of Boston. In front of a freshly painted White House, Megan was taking letters from the mailbox while holding 15-month-old Ethan. "Who's it from?" A gentle male voice came from behind her. Michael Green, a pediatrician whom Megan had met through Amber's introduction, had been dating Megan for 6 months. "It's from the daycare," Megan smiled in response. "It looks like Ethan's been accepted." Michael gently stroked Ethan's head. "Congratulations, champion. Ethan smiled happily. Megan and Michael had announced their engagement 3 months earlier and had purchased this house. Michael loved Ethan as if he were his own son, and Megan had opened her heart to his sincerity and kindness. Meanwhile, Brian and Jessica's relationship hadn't lasted. Having lost his position at the company due to scandal and financial setbacks, Brian gradually fell into alcohol dependency. Jessica, complaining this isn't what was promised, began a relationship with another wealthy man and eventually disappeared, abandoning Brian and their son. Carol, branded as the shame of an honorable lineage, was excluded from social circles and lost her position as the chairperson of charity organizations. Depressed from the loneliness of not seeing her grandson and the loss of social status, she ended up spending her elderly years without family in a nursing home in the same town where she had once coldly treated Megan. Ironically, Megan volunteered at that nursing home. Though not directly assigned to Carol, occasionally she would see that pitiful figure and think to herself, karma comes around. Carol could only watch from afar as Megan lived happily with her new family. In her eyes, tears of regret glistened.